We are live. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the American Supply Association's Mike Miazga. I would like to welcome you to another one of our ASA COVID-19 Impact Town Hall interviews. I got a very special guest this afternoon. I'm joined by Rick Fantham, who is the President and CEO of Hajoca Corporation. Hajoca has more than 700 locations throughout North America. 430 of those reside in the United States. Another nearly 300 across Canada, and that's through the MCO and Noble brands. And of course, Rick was our ASA president in 2015. And something I learned during Rick's presidency in 2015, a little Hajoca trivia fact. The company folklore has it that Hajoca's orange and black logo was the second trademark to be registered with the U.S. Patent Office. And we're talking about a company here that dates back to 1858. How you doing today, Rick?
Super. Great to see you, Mike.
Yeah, same here. These interviews that we've been doing are hugely helpful to our members, and I thank you for coming on today. Just a great way to not only put folks at ease to know that there's other people out there going through the same type of stuff they are in their business, but also you know, my hope in doing these is someone that's watching this from a company can take away a couple of best practices they can use either right now or going forward. My first, you know, with Hajoca being a North American company, footprint in both the United States and Canada, what's been your take kind of on what regions have been impacted more? We've seen in these interviews that it's most certainly a regional type thing with parts of the United States getting hit more than others. My first part of the question, what are you seeing in Canada and the United States as it, you know, pertains to your locations? And then B, kind of a comparison, since you're doing business in both countries with the COVID-19, the shutdown procedures, your thoughts on that as well.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mike. First of all, I'd very much echo what you said. Very much a regional impact throughout North America. As I look at our landscape, Arizona would be the strongest region for us in North America, still with positive growth. And probably ground zero would be in Quebec, the French province in Canada, which has been the most restrictive. And in fact, our sales in Quebec in the first 2 weeks of April we're down 93%. It's started to ease up a little bit today, but you really do see it being very much regionalized. And so as I watch on both sides of the border, as more and more of the decision-making power moves to state and local governments, I think that's appropriate because they're closer to the customer. They're more in tune with what's happening on a local basis. The second thing I saw throughout North America is really construction, and plumbing wholesale in particular has emerged as an essential service, and that's great news. I think there's natural physical distancing, there's value in terms of movement of water and air, and to use an accounting term, one phenomena that I've observed is the construction seems to be the last in terms of the shutdown, and then one of the first out as the governments try and get the economies going again. So we're thankful for that. And provided we've done the right things on protecting our people, I think the essential services have been really key to us weathering this storm. In terms of Canada versus the US, I think Canada had the benefit of learning from Europe and from the US. It feels like the pandemic showed up on the Canadian border about 2 to 3 weeks after it did in the US. And I think Canada also has the advantage of less population density. The premiers, like the governors in Ontario and Quebec, were probably the most aggressive in terms of lockdown. And that's where the economy has been hurt the most in the two most populated areas. But the benefit of that is the fatality ratio in Canada has been lower. Given the population, we would typically expect the fatality rate to be 10% of the US experience in Canada, and we're running at exactly 5%. So we're getting a benefit on the health side, but paying a price on the economic side. As I canvass the North American landscape in terms of looking at the health economic leadership across North America. I would say the province of British Columbia was the jurisdiction that found the right balance. Fairly early on, after an outbreak in a seniors home, the director of health was Attila the Hun on physical distancing, and they keep that in place today, but kept construction and kept the economy going. And so it's been actually our most positive region in Canada. So I think BC found that right balance between keeping their people safe, our people safe, and keeping the economy going.
So the crux of what we're going to talk about here today is your what we'll call your 4R plan of leadership attack. And what I'm curious, and we'll get into much more detail here in a minute. So the pandemic starts to unfold. As I've said before in these interviews, we were at a buying group meeting in early March, and literally we left there on a Friday, and it had already started. People had already started leaving. Companies were pulling people off the road by then, and then by Monday it was we were preparing to start working from home that next Tuesday. When you started to see things happening, kind of lead me through your thought process on developing this 4R leadership plan of attack.
Okay, great, thanks, Mike. I really look at March the 12th, Thursday, March the 12th, as kind of the day the song changed in North America. It was actually the day that the NBA postponed their season, and really was that tipping point for us. It was the day that we banned air travel. Or we planned to ban it on the following Monday. I was actually supposed to be on a plane on the Friday, March 13th. That flight got canceled. And so we were quickly into it, as you say, the following week, Mike. And as I started to watch all of our local leaders navigate their way through some uncharted territory, I'm no longer on the front line. And so I needed to find a way to add value. And so in that following week, I spent a bunch of time on the phone talking to our profit center managers and just trying to get a better understanding of their challenges and where their focus was. And I came away thinking that one way I could add value was to provide a context to help them set their priorities and frame their decisions. And so that really was the genesis of the 4 Rs. I'm not normally a big fan of alliteration, but that's where we landed in terms of the 4 phases of behavior change that and one of the opportunities I get an opportunity to kind of look forward and look up on where we might be heading. And so develop this framework of resilience, readiness, recalibration, and recovery. And my goal is to support our frontline leaders in a what and how, but to clearly leave the decision-making closest to the customer with them, where they need to have the regional lens and the local lens on the when and the how much.
All right, we'll get into those 4 Rs here in just a second, but you've kind of got 4 words to live by, regardless if it's the COVID-19 pandemic or some other kind of crisis situation. What comes to mind with the word thoughtful?
Yeah, I see folks started to look for me for the tone of leadership that was appropriate as we started to work our way through this, and came, the way I characterized it was thoughtful, deliberate, and responsive. And on the thoughtful side, in the early days, there was a kind of a communication frenzy, a risk of panic. And so thoughtful was just to slow things down a bit, to have that balance of emotional and rational, but not to just grab at the first solution that came to mind. Number 2, deliberate. This to have a bias for action, but to have it fact-based. And I absolutely believe doing nothing would be a very, very risky decision. And number 3, responsive. This is the fastest threat and the fastest downturn that I've experienced in my career. I probably worked my way through 5 downturns, but this one was clearly the steepest slope, and I felt we needed to respond. Within responsiveness, I think agility and adaptability are key, with a sense of urgency, and then given it's all a willingness to learn by doing.
So for the 4 Rs, let's start with resilience first. At the top of that has to be the safety and health of your people, the Hajoca folks and their families, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. You nailed it. And I really saw this, it probably started before the March 12th, but really came to the fore on March the 12th. And the overriding priority is the safety of our people and their families. And from a leadership to set that tone so that was job one. I'm very pleased to say that, touch wood, that so far we have only one positive case of COVID-19, and that person self-isolated and was fine after 14 days. So far we've been successful in keeping our folks safe. I think in that resilience phase, emotional leadership is key and sending a very real message of I and we care. From a national perspective, I think because it was the pandemic was such a new challenge, in that early days, probably that first 10 days, we saw a big part of our responsibility is providing guidelines for support around teammate and customer communication, any income support we were going to provide, and the operational protocol through the pandemic. Sending a strong message of concern, but also a confidence of calm so that our teammates felt that we were heading in the right direction. In that time, rumors and speculation are big in the headlines and on the networks, and I think it was critical that we focused on the facts, and when we got into a situation with one of our teammates is to understand and ask a whole bunch of questions around where the heart of their fear was. It was during that first 10 days that we implemented curbside pickup, virtual showrooms, physical distancing, work from home, and for our larger locations, A and B shifts.
Now, when you talk about the readiness part of it, that's you're turning your focus now more on protection, correct?
Right. And one thing that I ended up being wrong on, I thought each of these phases would take up to 30 days. The world moved a little faster than that. So we were in the readiness phase within about 7 to 10 days. So at the end of that following week. And in the readiness phase, you start to have a bit more balance where it focuses on protection of your people and protection of your business. And particularly in the Northeast and in parts of Canada, it became very clear very fast that the market was going to take a big drop. And so we needed to reset our business and work our way through this so that we're in a position to work through the challenging time, but also be ready for the next part of the cycle. So spend a lot of time on people, expenses, credit, inventory. And when I look back on it, it's hard to believe that in the last 6 weeks, over $30 million of Americans have lost their job and now on unemployment insurance. The challenge of the readiness phase is that the decisions are particularly tough because people are still in that resilience mindset of keeping their people safe. They're close to their teams. And one thing that was a big challenge is the degree of uncertainty on when and how much. When you look back on 2008, 2009, 2010, is we knew there was overbuilding, we knew there was a financial crisis, and we knew there would be a downturn for a period of time. This one, it was a bit more like navigating in the fog, and so I think that degree of uncertainty made it unsettling for a lot of our leaders. And also, you couldn't rely on rearview mirror. A lot of people I talked to had a record first quarter, which pretty much became irrelevant as we closed March, and so we needed to have kind of scoreboards or ways of monitoring current performance and looking at things like 3-day rolling averages and backlog and whatnot. So as we worked through the readiness phase, we provided options on what people could do. You heard about things like furloughs and whatnot, an understanding of the labor laws. We looked at performance ratings and adaptability and agility of our folks and who was most valuable to the team. As in most downturns, and I've been involved in, our whole focus became on protecting the core. That you owe more to the people that are part of the enduring solution, that the people are not. And so our real drive was that we want to have our core folks that work their way through this challenge just fine. We found it's better to take strong action early and get on the right course and to kind of let things drag on, kind of consistent with what I said earlier around deliberate. And then to get to that position where you say, okay, I think we've got the business in the right place to thrive through the next phase, and let's move forward with our core. Again, to my opening comment about regionalization, dramatic variability in the impact by market, and so our actions depended on the quality of the local leader, the team, the customer partnerships, and the financial performance. For us, it was a great time for decision making to be in the front line. And our goal is to take the short-term action, but be consistent with the medium-term strategy. And it's interesting, as I look back on the last couple of weeks, I think for the most part, we emerged out of the readiness phase, in my own mind, last Wednesday. And so in about 30 days, we worked our way through getting the business reset, and now we're prepared to move into recalibration.
And recalibration, it's more not so much hour by hour reaction, but starting to plan out maybe days and weeks ahead.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. Yeah, I agree. And in a lot of the ways, not emotionally, but in a lot of ways, from a leadership perspective or functionally, recalibration intellectually could be the toughest phase. You're right, your time frame starts to change. You look up and look out a little more. Certainly in that first 10 days, it almost felt like every hour was different. And now our folks and myself and our folks are starting to look days and weeks. I wouldn't say we've got the month yet, but days and weeks looking forward. You start to see a bit of a early play to win mindset emerge, less than that survival kind of hunker down mindset. And today, I think over 50% of our profit center managers have made that shift into recalibration, which is really energizing. The challenge of recalibration, though, is uncertainty. And it's uncertainty with a number of factors that sometimes are conflicting. You've got health, government, customers, consumers, and vendors. And clearly, our number one priority continues to be health. But we are concerned about the threat of a second wave. We're counseling our people to stay the course on physical distancing, and we're clearly watching the progress they're making on development of vaccine. The second factor is government. The varied government guidelines for reopening all over the United States, a lot of mixed messages on the reopening protocol. We look at the amount of debt that is coming into the system at all levels of government, on the individuals, on companies, and what's going to be the impact in terms of stimulus. Coming out of 2008, 2010, we saw stimulus. Not sure how that will work in today's reality. On the customer side, talking to customers, I hear concerns about productivity, the whole job site impact there. I continue to see apprehension around safety, obviously a concern around cash flow, and it'll be interesting to see the different influences by segment with residential new construction, commercial, and repair and remodel, and all of them will come back at different paces. From a consumer side, there continues to be fear, and yet offset by that need for connectivity. And so you've seen some of the activity in Michigan and in Huntington Beach and in Florida, where people just want to get out and start to relate again, but still with a background of both emotional and financial health. And then on the vendor side, I think that the COVID threat in a large manufacturing facility is bigger than what we face, particularly in our decentralized model. Building up inventory, the supply chain, freight, the role they can play, how do they make sales calls today? And so the recalibration phase, which I think is going to, initially I was kind of thinking 2 to 3 months. I think it's going to be a bumpy time. I think it's going to be more 3 to 6 to 9 months. We had a board meeting last week where they're saying, hey, think about recalibration over the next 12 months. And it doesn't mean you're not playing offense, but you're being very agile in terms of your response to the market. So we think we're firmly in the recalibration phase and working our way through it.
And then once you go from recalibration, we're into recovery. Kind of same thing with recalibration. A lot of different variables at play.
Yeah, recovery and this kind of gets to the fun part, and where you do start to see sustained positive economic growth resuming. I've been reading a lot of stuff from folks like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and the various banks, and a lot of the forecasters are saying we likely won't see 2019 until 2022. As I said earlier, I think it's going to be a muted recovery because of the level of personal, company, and government debt. I think it could favor our sector. I think of touchless faucets. I think about the cocooning in the household, the importance of clean air and clean water. And in the past, construction has been a target for stimulus, so I feel good about that. I see new norms are emerging in the recovery phase, both internally in terms of productivity and externally in terms of how we relate together, things like today, like these conference calls. I think it's a good time for a company as we're getting into the recovery phase to either leverage your value proposition or to pivot if you don't see the strength of your traditional value proposition being sustainable. And certainly you hear a lot of people saying this today, and certainly from the Fed, cash is king. And so a great time to put a strong balance sheet to work and investing aggressively in your people, a great time to invest in people development, investing in your inventory, and investing in your business.
Now, if we go back to the recalibration phase real quick, you say there's 4 key characteristics that should be occurring before you can pivot over to recovery.
Yeah, good question, Mike. And our goal, I think, as a company and I think as a country, is really to find a way to thrive in this period of uncertainty that we're going to go through over the next few months. And as I've listened and observed over the last 50 days and watched our high-performing teams and our high-performing individuals, there's really 4 qualities that I've seen that demonstrate that shift to a play-to-win mindset, and really health, innovate, and create. Number 1 is pay attention to your emotional well-being. I think this is one that's been understated and one that we jumped on early, that the uncertainty, the working from home, I used to be on the road 47, 48 weeks a year. I've been home since March the 12th, and really adjusting to that. I think so taking that time to ask family and teammates how they're doing, finding the ways to stay connected, setting realistic goals that are practical and short-term, and on the weekends, finding some downtime. So I think emotional well-being is number 1. Number 2, stay vigilant on physical health. I don't want the bar to drop too much. We're now introducing new counter and showroom guidelines to reopen our facilities in a physically distancing way. We're looking at thermometers. The focus on washing your hands every 30 minutes. The 30 minutes is okay. I found the 20 seconds the tough part. Yep. And then at home, people are at home, finding new ways to exercise and really taking care of yourself. Number 3 is innovate. Innovate on how we do things inside our business and find ways to work smarter and think really all about efficiency. And I see that on a regular basis. One of the examples of one of the benefits of having so many locations is you see even the implementation of the new counter was done different ways and smarter ways, and I think that's great. I think that's here to stay. I think curbside pickup is increased. We've heard from a number of our customers that it rewards efficiency as opposed to having the inefficient guy on the front of the lineup at the counter. So innovate on your internally within your business, and then create new opportunities with customers externally. I mentioned earlier about the touchless faucets. PPE, I think, is an opportunity. A lot of our managers have started to make virtual sales calls. So I think a part of starting to thrive in this period of uncertainty is mental health, physical health, innovate, and create.
Now, you kind of already put on your prognostication cap earlier with the 2019 to 2022 comparison. if you had to firmly implant the 8-ball hat on your head, what where do you see this headed short term coming out of the pandemic, and what are the longer lasting effects that we might see? I mean, again, with your unique perspective throughout North America.
Okay. Yeah, this kind of the question of the day. I'll start with the only thing I know for sure is I'll be wrong. But the as I said earlier, our board has advised that we kind of stay in that recalibration mindset for the balance of the year, and really staying agile and staying adaptable, finding ways to exploit opportunities and market and customer niches. The one thing, and I was a finance grad, not an economics grad, but lively debate in the public domain around whether it's going to be a V or a U or a W or a Nike swoosh. Our own sense is it's going to look like a W. That we will see some recovery. In some cases, some really solid recovery, but some things will hold that back. Health could hold that back. A second wave could hold that back. As I said earlier, debt, consumer behavior. We've seen that in China, where the supply chain side came back, but the customer didn't. The demand side didn't. And so we're operating under the thinking of a W. The consensus, and we've reforecasted the year, and we're in the same place. The consensus, as I talk to our customers and our key vendors across North America, is that 2020 will be down 10 to 15%. We're in that range, and as I said earlier, nationally, that we really don't get back to 2019 levels until 2022. The good news in the United States, perhaps better than Canada, is the economic fundamentals are strong coming into this. Most companies were strong, and the economy was strong. So I think there is an underlying strength there that will support a recovery, but I think it's going to be bumpy. As I say, the only thing I know for sure is I'll be wrong.
I don't know about that. Just a ton of great information here. And again, Rick, I can't thank you enough for taking a couple minutes today to talk. Rick Fantham, President, CEO of Hajoca Corporation. Two quick ASA programming notes. Our chief economist, Chris Keel, will be back with us Wednesday, May 15th for another COVID-19 economic impact webinar. Head to the ASA website, asa.net, to sign up for that. Look out for alerts in your email box, and also for the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic. Also visit our website for our COVID-19 ASA Resource Center, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, Rick, hang on here.